Protests erupted in Dar es Salaam as opposition supporters took to the streets in that cause. All right, shall be having a conversation in depth in that that particular story in the dailies today. Meanwhile, protests erupted in Dar es Salaam as opposition. All right, let's take that particular story. Now in Kenya, the university's academic staff union, WASU, has maintained that lecturers and public university workers will remain on strike despite the government's agreement to pay 7.9 billion Kenya shillings in salary arrears under the 2017-2021 collective bargaining agreement. Now, WASU says the lecturers have rejected the proposal to pay the amount in 3 installments, insisting instead the entire sum be paid at once. Now, the union has also dismissed government claims that learning in ongoing in some public universities, saying the strike remains fully in force nationwide. Now, the industrial action has now stretched for over a month, leaving thousands of students stranded and uncertain about their academic future, with many facing financial and emotional strain from the prolonged closure of universities. Take a look.
This problem again, instead of paying the 7.9 billion, they are now proposing to pay it in phases. So if the government is proposing that they want to implement 7.9 billion in 3 phases, that is 3 strikes. And we don't want to subject our students to further frustration in the future. They better suffer now up to December. We clear all these things. Come January, a clean slate. They study up to 2030. I'll call another strike in 2030. So let the country know that lecturers have blatantly refused that they are not going back to work if the 7.9 billion is not paid at once. Lecturers have refused again that they will not go back to work if the 2025-2029 CBA is negotiated, signed, registered, and implemented.
Right, still on matters education, the National Assembly Committee on Education has raised concerns over the delay in disbursement of school capitation funds, directing the Ministry of Education to compile a detailed report on the matter, describing it as a pain in the neck for many learning institutions. Now, the committee says persistent delays have crippled operations in school across the country, with some institutions yet to receive their capitation, leaving heads of schools stranded and struggling to keep schools running despite having submitted all the required documentation. Appearing before the committee to discuss the ministry's preparedness for the upcoming national examinations, Education Cabinet Secretary Julius Migoso Gamba said the government has already released funds to schools whose records have been verified.
Loiter ward in Narok South, which since its inception, it has never received capitation, and the school is running an examination. As we sit here, KCSE is going on, and they do not have money, and yet they are supposed to procure examination materials for laboratories and all that. So how does that principal run that school?
We did agree that by last week, or it was the other week, that all schools in this country should have received their share of capitation.
Chair,
and you directed that.
Chair, and they have.
You directed that. But yes, now you are saying about 27.
No. The 29.
Yes.
29 about
Yes.
are 29 schools that are not in the system for capitation. That they are going to verify the reason why they are not registered.
But someone is sleeping on the jobs here.
Yes.
Someone is sleeping on the job, especially from those sub-counties.
The schools that were registered for capitation, the resources have been released because those are the resources that were requested for. If the school was not in the system for capitation, they would not have requested for those resources in the budget from Treasury. So when you indicate that I have to tell you and I have to release money to 29 schools, it's not going to be possible.
All right, at the same time, Interior Principal Secretary Raymond Omolo has assured the country that the government has put in place robust measures to ensure that the ongoing rains across various parts of the country do not disrupt the distribution of national examination papers. Speaking after presiding over the opening of the examination storage container in Starehe sub-county yesterday, Omolo acknowledged that flooding in Tana River County had already briefed delayed distributions, but the situation was swiftly addressed to avert further setbacks. The PS further revealed that relevant authorities are closely monitoring social media platforms throughout the examination period, warning that individuals circulating fake exam papers will face severe consequences. Grade 6 Kenya Primary School Education Assessment, that is KPSEA, officially concluded yesterday, while the Grade 9 Kenya Junior Secondary Education Assessment, that is KGSEA, is set to wrap up next Monday.
Where we've had delay in the distribution of examination papers, but again the teams have worked around the clock to ensure that the integrity of the assessment or the examination is not compromised. We have had a few cases of students falling sick or being hospitalized, and again the teams have worked to ensure that they still are able to do the examination. We had a case in Tana River yesterday, which again was resolved. Yeah, so the short rains have just begun, so we can't. We expect that we would still be able to ensure that the exams get to the schools in good time.
All right, now let's talk matters politics. And Embu Senator Alex Mondigi has appealed to members of the Orange Democratic Movement, that is ODM, to throw their weight behind the Kenya Kwanza government following the passing of their long-time leader, the late Raila Odinga. Now speaking in Embu, Mondigi revealed that before his death, Odinga had already established a working relationship with President William Ruto aimed at ensuring his supporters were not left behind in the national development agenda. The senator also cautioned ODM members against being misled by politicians pursuing selfish interest under the guise of party loyalty, urging unity and peace as the country moves forward. He further appealed to residents of Embu to remain firm in supporting the government and continue championing peace and progress nationwide.
Kiongozi wenu amemwacha kwa serikali ya William Ruto na Profesa Abraham Kithure kwa sababu hawaangalii ni mrengo gani iliwachagua. Kwa hiyo msikumbali, miaka mingi mmeteseka, miaka mingi mmeumia, na saa hii serikali inajali maslahi ya kila mwananchi. Watu wa Embu County, tafadhali tukumbali kushikilia hii serikali ya William Ruto na makamu wake Profesa Abraham Kithure njia ya development tuweze kuona vile ina.
All right, register the political parties in the country will now have to wait a little longer before receiving their share of funds from the political parties fund, a delay attributed to the ongoing financial challenges facing the nation. According to the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties, the institution has only managed to disburse funds for the first quarter, with the National Treasury yet to release the remaining allocation owed to political parties. The delay has since drawn complaints from several parties, among them the Orange Democratic Movement, which now warns that the setback could hinder their preparations ahead of the upcoming by-elections slated for November.
That qualifies to get funding. I think it is within our practice that we always do that. Of course, we receive the fund just from Treasury like any other organ. And so for as much as the money has been given to us, we actually distributed according to the structure that has been given. I think we already did for the first quarter, and we're still waiting, of course, for the next funding. Of course, I know resources is a big challenge for the parties in terms of how to operate, but it's a challenge that we must face because in order to grow multi-party democracy, it has to cost something to us. So as much.
All right, now controversy continues to deepen over the Religious Organizations Bill 2024, with a section of religious leaders terming the proposed law as punitive and unconstitutional. Led by Bishop Hudson Deda, the clergy warned that the bill presents a threat to Kenya's constitutional freedom of worship, saying it seeks to stifle religious expression and suppress clergy members, calling for its immediate withdrawal. The leaders have also criticized the Computer Misuse and Cybercrime Amendment Act, claiming it unfairly targets young people who rely on digital platforms to express themselves and earn a living. They are now urging the government to intervene, calling on Parliament to suspend the implementation of the law and engage the public in consultations before passing such far-reaching legislation.
The church cannot therefore keep silent at a time when unconstitutional and oppressive laws are passed by a parliament which derives its power from the people. Computer Misuse and Cybercrime Amendment Act contains sections that are punitive and oppressive. In a society where young people utilize electronic gadgets to agitate for better rights and earning a living through content, the concern of the church is that 2027 is approaching, and having such laws in our country is not good for the political climate. We have also noted with concern the issue on religious extremism in the bill, which in our view is open to abuse and will be used to persecute innocent clergy serving the people.
Now, the head of public service, Felix Kosgei, has taken a swipe at a section of independent commissions established under the Chapter 15 of the Constitution, accusing them of drawing huge salaries from taxpayers while failing to deliver on their mandate to Kenyans. Speaking during the launch of the Salaries and Remuneration Commission 2025-2030 strategic plan in Nairobi, Kosgei lamented the rising levels of corruption in the public service, saying it remains the root cause of underdevelopment and a major impediment to economic growth across all arms of the government. The SRC says its new strategic plan aims to bridge wage disparities by promoting fairness, competence, and accountability across all levels of public service.
We have a discussion and say public service, politics is a no-go in public service. We need to have a conversation. We need to have a conversation. This politics, to what extent should it enter into judicial? Do we have to draw a line? We need to draw a line. In executive, in judiciary, we need to draw a line. In commissions, we need to draw a line so that we protect the institutions that are pillars of a nation to continuously, because they are perpetual, to drive the development of the country in a manner that it follows a trajectory that is designed without having discretionary decisions going along.
Now, the Machakos County government has dismissed claims that some hospital workers at the Machakos Level 5 hospital have gone for months without pay. Now, speaking to journalists in Machakos Town, County Executive Committee member for Health, that is Justice Kasivu, clarified that those who have not been paid are employees of private contractor who delayed their salaries despite having received payment from the county government on time. Now, this comes after the Senate Health Committee, during a visit to the facility over a weekend, was informed by some members of staff that they had not received their wages for more than 6 months, a situation that has raised concerns over service delivery in the county's health sector.
Just want to state that the county government of Machakos takes cognizance of some inaccurate reports that were carried in sections of the media last week. alluding to failure by the government of Machakos to compensate a number of casual employees working in Machakos Level 5 who are under a contractor. We wish to take this early opportunity to clarify that the county government of Machakos does not have any pending salary obligations with any of our payroll officers. We emphasize with the citizens whose wages were delayed by the said contractor, and I want to confirm here now that it is the responsibility of the contractor to pay his or her staff. Once we engage a contractor to give services, it is the responsibility of the contractor to pay their officers, because we also pay the contractors when their payments fall due. Confirm that we are talking to the contractor and we are going to look at the contract, what it says, and we are going to take the necessary actions to ensure that does not happen again going forward.
Now, the Parliamentary Committee on Security has come to the defense of Inspector General of Police Douglas Kanja, saying the responsibility for registering new recruits lies squarely with his office, not the National Police Service Commission. Now, the move comes amid a power struggle between the police department and the commission, which had taken over the role of registration of new officers. Speaking at the Police Training College in Ngong, some officials described the disputes as a scheme to undermine the Inspector General's authority over police recruitment.
Today we have the UNDP, we also have the Parliamentary Security Committee together with us here, so that they can also be able to take them through. You know, this committee plays a critical role when it comes to matters legislative and even the funding programs of the National Police Service. That's the reason why, as the National Police Service, we find it very critically important that we also take the committee through as a major stakeholder, as the representatives of the people, so that they can be able to understand very, very, very clearly where we are on matters reforms and the journey that we have actually been able to travel over the transformation agenda.
From where I sit, I believe that we must appreciate the unique position and the situation of the police. This is uniform discipline force, so unarmed. So we cannot just treat like any other workers that commission is run by, any other competent civilian. Of course, we believe strongly that the IG, who is the commanding officer, is the commandant, supposed to have full control, because he can only draw discipline and enforce his powers when he fully has the control of instruments.
Now, Kwale Governor Fatuma Achani has moved to reassure residents living on the disputed Mwereni land that no one will be displaced, promising that more than 100,000-acre parcel will be subdivided and allocated to about 15,000 rightful residents who have occupied it for generations. Governor Achani's assurance comes amid reports of individuals using fake title deeds to lay false ownership claims and block the county's plan to survey and distribute the land. Now, Achani revealed that the county government, in partnership with the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, has already reclaimed the land and vowed that all legitimate residents will soon receive their official land.
Wapelekeni salamu wale waliogushi, waliokuwa na ile title deed fake. Wapelekeni salamu, waambieni gavana wa jimbo la Kwale ni wakili pia. Kwa sababu sisi kitu tunataka ni mwananchi wa Mwereni aweze kupata haki yake. Ndio sababu tukasema tutapima ardhi ya Mwereni kulingana na vile ambavyo watu wa Mwereni watataka.
Sisi tunataka mpimo uende jembe kwa jembe, nitambuliwe au nisitambuliwe, lakini kwa sababu ndio maoni yetu sisi wana Mwereni. Si kwamba kwa sababu mimi ndio mwandishi, lakini tupimiwe jembe kwa jembe kama yalivyo mapendekezo yetu tulivyotoa wakati ule.
Right, moving on to some sad story. Residents of Misiku Market in Bungoma County are living in fear following the discovery of 3 bodies in separate incidents, sparking outrage and renewed concerns over the rising insecurity in the area. Traders have condemned what they described as gruesome and senseless killings, accusing local security officers of negligence and failing to protect residents. They are now calling for improved lighting and enhanced night patrols to help curb the growing crime wave. Meanwhile, detectives from Webuye Police Station have launched investigations to establish those behind the murders as the bodies were moved to Webuye Webuye and Bungoma mortuaries for post-mortem examination.
Nimekuja nikapata watchman wangu ameuawa na pharmacy imebomolewa. Wezi wameingia wakachukua vitu zenye zilikuwa hapo. Kwa kadri hatujaangalia ni nini na nini zimeenda, lakini electronics zote hazipatikani kwa duka. Alafu kuangalia na wamevunja mahali penye tunaweka pesa.
Soko ya Misihu haina usalama. Wale maofisa wenye wako katika hii soko tuliongea nao wafanye patrol kuanzia saa 5 ya usiku, mtu asipatikane katika hii soko, lakini kuanzia wakati tuliongea nao hakuna jambo yoyote ambayo imefanyikana. Hao maofisa wenye waka hapa tujue wanalinda watukani, kwa sababu usalama hii soko haiko. Hata leo usiku hatujui ni nani leo atakufa. Sasa tunaomba serikali iingilie kati na county commission ikuje angalie hii kati ya hii soko ya Misihu ni nini yenye iko katika hii soko ya Misihu.
Eka muda tukilia kwa sababu ya uwaji wa kiholela holela katika hii soko ya Misihu. Last month mtoto aliuawa hapa, tukashughulika, tukaita maafisa wakakuja, lakini hatujaona suluhisho yoyote. Wakati huu asubuhi ya leo tumekuja katika kazi yetu, tumepata soja mmoja ameuawa. Hatujui soko ya Misihu tutaenda wapi na tutafanya nini. Hata wametutia uoga katika kazi yetu, hatujui tutaenda wapi.
Tuashindwa kwa nini kama county commissioner anaweza tuletea maskari hapa? Kazi yao mzuri ni ya kuchukua tu mili ya watu wenye wamekufa, lakini kusaidia watu walio hai hawatusaidii. Mwanzo wale watu wenye wamekaa hapa kama maskari wamekaa muda huu mwingi sana within Webuye East na Bungoma County. Transfer zao zinaenda hapa, likitoka hapa anaenda Matisi, anaenda yani anakaa karibu paka anahusika tu na wale vijana wakora wanapatikana wanahusika na wale maaskari wetu hapa ndani. Wenye wafanye nini? Hawezi pigwa transfer waende mbali. Zetu nyingi katika hii soko unapata sehemu moja kama hii taa hawezi zipata. Maaskari wenyewe kufanya patrol imekuwa shida. Sisi tuwaomba kitu moja, county commissioner tubadilishie maaskari, mtuletee maaskari wenye wanafanya nini? Wanasaidia wananchi hapa. Tunakuja governor atusaidie taa, kwa sababu sehemu nyingi ya hii Misihu sokoni iko na giza.
Maafisa wa hapa wameshika wezi wengi hapa. Wanapofika kwa police station unapata mlalamishi anasema mimi sitaki huyu kijana aende kotini ama huyu mama aende kotini. Sasa wakati yeye anakataa kupeleka huyu mshtakiwa kotini, serikali sisi hatuna nguvu ya kupeleka huyu kotini. Sasa kitu ninaweza kuambia wananchi wa Misihu, tafadhali, lack of information tienafanya hii mambo na.
Alright, at the same time, police in Transmara South have launched investigations into the gruesome murder of a grade 9 pupil, an incident that has left residents shaken and a family in deep sorrow. And according to Area Sub-County Police Commander Erinko Telewa, the young girl was reportedly attacked, defiled and hacked to death by unknown assailants while on her way to school on Wednesday morning. Her body was later discovered dumped inside a sugarcane plantation. Now, multi-agency team has since begun investigations to identify and apprehend those behind the heinous act. The incident has sparked outrage among members of the community who demand that investigations into the incident be expedited to bring the perpetrators to book. The body of the minor was moved to Lolgorian Level 4 Hospital mortuary.
Kuna mwili kutoka hapo akakucha kupika report. Ningeomba wananchi ambao wako na information kama hii.
Right, quite unfortunate story right there. At that note, we take a short breather here on Morning Live, but when we come back, we tell you what exactly is happening in our dailies today. Don't go too far. course, the draft religious organization policy of 2024 and the draft religious organization bill of 2024, which are set to provide a framework of regulations of religious organizations in a bid to combat religious extremism and the abuse of freedom of religion, has been termed as antichrist. Of course, that's quote unquote of the Daily Nation. And of course, in a press conference held yesterday, the Church and Clergy Association of Kenya, that is the CCAK, asked President William Ruto to intervene and allow religious groups to give their views on the matter. Now, according to the CCAK, the government is seeking to crack down on online preaching by targeting Christian television's networks. All right? And the mention of the some umbrella body and formation of a commission in bill is suspect and discriminative. Of course, those are the words of Bishop Ndenda. And of course, the CCAK, at the same time, Secretary General Bishop Johnson Ochieng, said that while the government is keen on stopping the Shakahola massacre from repeating itself, targeting all the religious organizations because of a single matter will undermine the good relationship that has been there between the government and such organizations. And according to the government, the proposal in the draft bill was picked from, the Presidential Task Force of the review of the legal and regulatory framework. And of course, I don't know what's your thought on this. This is a matter that came up, of course, during the Shakahola massacre. Of course, the government was saying there is need, to regulate churches, and of course, that churches must be, registered under the government. And of course, now the government wants to pass a bill, the draft religious organizations policy of 2024 and the draft religious organization bill, of course, of 2024. Do send us your thoughts. The SMS line to 3059, of course. And I shall be taking a look at that later on in the program. Moving on, police order curfew after protest hit Tanzania pole. Right, that was yesterday, and there is a picture there of an injured protester in Tanzania during the conduct of the country's election. Police battled pockets of violent protest in the commercial capital, Dar es Salaam, even as authorities imposed internet restrictions and a curfew to curb a wave of chaos on the voting day. Of course, that's all yesterday in Tanzania, there was a curfew actually. Of course, yesterday they were also, doing their polls, their general elections of voting yesterday in Tanzania, which started actually at 6 a.m. Of course, later on, it turned chaotic, and the head of state in that particular country, that is Mama Samia Suluhu Hassan, had to, announce a curfew. Of course, there were restrictions in the internet. Of course, we shall be, taking a look on what's actually happening in Tanzania. And of course, we shall be bringing you subsequent updates in regards to that. Now let's talk matters politics here in the country. And Oburu Turuto says, Oburu, of course, is the CI senator, and of course, the brother to the late former Prime Minister, that is Raila Amolo Odinga, says, we welcome you back to ODM, but now the acting ODM leader says the president will have to fight to be the party flag bearer. That's on page 10. Let's take a look at that particular story on page 10 of the Daily Nation Matters Politics. All right. And Dr. Oginga, that is Oburu Oginga, also urged the old guard to respectfully cede control of the party to the youthful leaders who spent many years around former Prime Minister Raila Odinga as his students in politics. Now, Dr. Odinga said that that should Dr. Ruto drop his United Democratic Alliance party in favor of ODM, he would be automatically become the presidential flag bearer. All right. And according to ODM leader, the president would have to compete for the position just like other qualified candidates who expressed interest in it. He said this was because the party was working towards becoming a stronger outfit by 2027 with the aim to attracting as many members as possible. Now, he emphasized that as one of the strongest parties, ODM, would field a presidential candidate in the next general elections with the goal of forming the next government. All right? Now, since the passing of, the late Raila Amolo Odinga, during his funeral, that is in Kangoka Jaramogi in Bondo, there were, statements, differing statements from, the members of the ODM. And of course, the ODM actually issued public statements or a press statement to the public this particular week, where Sifuna said he will continue supporting the government until 2027. And of course, during the funeral, some leaders said that there are those leaders in the outfit saying that they have differing views in regards to supporting the head of state in what had to become a broad-based government. Now, the Siaya senator, who also doubles up, to be the acting party leader, that is Oburu Oginga, and who's also the brother to the late former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, now says that the party, that is ODM party, will have to bring out their presidential candidate come 2027. And now he says if William Ruto wants support from ODM, to become the presidential flag bearer, will he, should he leave UDA, they will, champion for him for the presidential candidacy come 2027 under ODM party. All right? Tell me your thoughts about that particular story, the Royal SMS line to 3059. Now let's move on to other stories making headlines on the Daily Nation. And the EACC detectives raid governors' homes with in 382 million Kenya shillings corruption probe. Of course, that's a story on page 10, where detectives attached to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, that is the EACC, yesterday stormed the Nairobi, Kisii, and Nyamira homes of Governor Amos Nyaribo at dawn, as part of a sweeping corruption investigations, into the alleged theft of hundreds of millions of shillings in public funds. Now, the coordinated searches carried out simultaneously also targeted senior officials of the Nyamira County government suspected of, irregular tenders, unauthorized payments, and abuse of office. And according to the EACC, the operation followed court-issued, each warrants in relation to the 382 million contract for the construction of tender awarded to Spendage Engineering Limited is alleged to have been marred by procurement irregularities and questionable payments. Of course, that's a story that goes on and on page 10 of the Daily Nation newspaper this morning. Of course, let's take a look at other stories making headlines in the Daily Nation. And the Auditor General unmasks Ketraco way leaves scandal. Now the audit reveals massive irregularities in the payment of 12.99 billion in way leave compensation. Of course, a story on page 12 of the Daily Nation. And one may wonder, these corruption cases in the newspapers. Of course, a week can't end if without having such a story in matters corruption. Of course, the EACC are up in arms to make sure the curbing corruption in the country. Of course, you'll remember that this particular week, actually, the Karura Forest was given back to the government, which was allegedly taken by private investors. All right. Now the audit flags huge irregularities in Ketraco way leave payout scandal. Now a forensic audit that is before Parliament has revealed massive irregularities in the payment of 12.99 billion for way leave compensation by the Kenya Electricity Transmission Company, that is Ketraco Limited. And the Auditor General, Ms. Nyakango Gadongo's report covering 13 financial years from 2011 to 2022-2023 shows the compensation project was budgeted at 17.02 billion Kenya shillings, out of which 4.0 billion Kenya shillings remains outstanding to date. Now, Ms. Gadongo states that the the audit sought to establish accuracy and genuineness of the long outstanding well leave compensation as well as KETRACO's that is compliance with the law. Now, the irregularities identified include huge variance between the resettlement action plan and the compensation amount, lack of documentation, irregular compensation based on a revaluation, overvaluation, and overpayment for land in 7 donor-funded projects. Other irregularities are lack of guidelines on land regulations and recognitions, irregular engagement of valuer, failure to provide criteria used in sampling parcels of land to be valued and approved valuation schedules, irregular payments of top-ups, and unsupported payments of vouchers. And of course, that story also goes on and on page 12 of the Daily Nation Matters, Corridors of Justice, and the KETRACO versus the Auditor General, that is Ms. Gadungu. All right, moving on to matters education on the Daily Nation, why secondary school teachers will not invigilate KCSE exams. Right, now that's on page 7, matters education. Now, in a bid to curb malpractices, primary school tutors will take up the role, but principals still remain as center managers. And of course, I don't know, how was your case when, you did your national examinations back, in high school? All right. Now, secondary school teachers will not invigilate the 2025 Kenya Certificate of Secondary Education, that is KCSE examinations. Instead, the duty will be undertaken by their counterparts from primary schools. Now, secondary school teachers will, however, serve as supervisors, and for principals as center managers. The administrative change has been effected to curb examination malpractice in the national test. Now, the nation understands that the Kenya National Examination Council requested the Teachers Service Commission to employ teachers from primary schools to man the KCSE. The examinations will involve 10,765 center managers, 12,126 supervisors, 54,782 invigilators, and 22,247 security officers, and 2,692 drivers. Now, in the last KCSE examinations, a total of 840 candidates had their results cancelled due to their involvement in exam malpractice. Some of the cases were blamed on poor invigilation, including collusion with candidates to cheat, as well as failure to monitor or enforce rules. Now, officials' data further shows that results of 2,899 other candidates suspected of being involved in irregularities were withheld pending investigations by the NEC. Right, there you have it. Now, the KCSE will now be manned by teachers from the primary school in order to curb, exam malpractice as witnessed over the years, where some teachers were actually nabbed, assisting maybe the students or whatnot. Now, in this particular case, 2025 KCSE will be manned by the the primary teachers in primary schools. All right. Still matters education, shock as 17 pregnant grade 6 candidates at Mauma Hospital. Of course, 17 candidates undertook the Kenya Primary School Education Assessment, that is KPSEA, at Nyambane Level 5 Hospital in Meru County after giving birth. The examinations ended yesterday. The high number of grade 6 teenage mothers has jolted stakeholders, even as Meru continues to rank among the leading counties with high teenage pregnancy rates and sexual and gender-based violence. All right, that's quite unfortunate. You see grade 6 people, giving a child while, doing examination. Quite unfortunate situation to be in. All right, moving on to the Standard newspaper. Top story on the Standard newspaper is actually from across our borders, and there is a picture there of, on the front page, of course, of the Standard newspaper of the head of state of Tanzania, that is Samia Suluhu. And of course, yesterday's newspaper actually was titled Samia versus Suluhu, And today's particular newspaper on the Standard saying defying Suluhu. Now Tanzania is on edge as violent protests erupt across major cities with hundreds of angry youth defying police to denounce what they call a sham election. President Samia Suluhu Hassan is coasting to victory after sidelining opposition leaders and tightening her grip on power. Roads are burning, the internet is throttled, and the public transport has ground to a halt in unprecedented show of defiance. Of course, that's on page 6 actually, and 7 of the Standard newspaper. Let's take a look at that particular story. And of course, on the front page actually of the Standard newspaper, there is a picture there of police officers, and of course, what seems to be tear gas. There is smoke right there. And of course, there are youth who are seated right there. Of course, this seems as a situation where, the police are trying to curb the protesters, from causing chaos in the country. And of course, let's take a look at that particular story on page 6 and 7 of the Standard newspaper. Matters across our borders, and violence erupted in parts of Tanzania yesterday as angry youths clashed with anti-riot police in protest against what they termed as President Samia Suluhu's repression of the opposition. Now, several people were actually reportedly injured after demonstrators blocked major roads to demand electoral reforms and political freedom. All right, protesters lit fires, vandalized buses, and destroyed public infrastructure in several cities. Now, as voting for the presidential election took place, hundreds of youths jammed Kinara Kibo in Dar es Salaam, blocking Morogoro Road with rocks and burning tires truckloads, armed police arrived to disperse them. Now, similar protests were reported in towns near the Kenyan border, including Namanga, where smoke billowed from burning tires. Now, Tanzania police blocked Kenyans attempting to cross the border to join the demonstrations. The burning of tires and the blocking of roads, common in Kenya, are a new phenomenon in Tanzania. Most of those taking part are young people, drawing parallels to the Gen Z protests witnessed in Kenya and Madagascar. All right. Now, journalists in Dar es Salaam reported that the protest began near the Church of Resurrection and Life, recently closed by the government. The church is associated with Bishop Josephat Gwajima, a former CCM MP, who has criticized abductions, disappearances, and human rights abuses. All right. Now, the BBC later confirmed that the police fired tear gas to disperse opposition supporters protesting against election, widely seen as a shoe-in for President Samia Suluhu and her ruling party. The main opposition leader remains in jail on treason charges, actually, which he denies, while his party has boycotted the vote. And of course, we will remember that during the detention of the opposition leader, that is Tundu Lissu, actually Kenyan activists, including Bob Njagi, went, to hear his court, or rather his court proceeding, or rather his case in court proceedings. Of course, he was accompanied, or rather later on, we saw PLP party leader, that is Martha Karua, also, went to Tanzania for that matter. And of course, Tundu Lissu is actually detained on treason charges in Tanzania. He was an opposition leader, and of course, now, Dar es Salaam Regional Commission, Alfred Chamila, warned that the government will take firm accusation against the government, if the government will take a firm accusation against disturbing public order. Now, internet watchdog NetBlocks reported, to this particular newspaper, noting that Tanzania appeared to have restricted access during the polls. President Samia cast her votes at Chamwino polling station in Dodoma, where turnout was notably low. She arrived at around 11 a.m., joining a short queue of about 10 voters before casting her ballot. All right. Now let's take a look on key opposition leaders in that particular country. And key opposition leaders, that is Tundu Lissu from Chadema and Luhanga Mpina ACT, that is his party is actually ACT Wazalendo, have either been banned or disqualified from contesting, giving President Samia an unchallenged re-election path. At one polling station, the Tanzania Broadcasting Corporation, that is TBC, filmed Costa Kibunde and Makini Party's presidential candidate walking in alone to cast his vote. No other voter in sight. All right, that's matters, what's actually happening to our neighbors here in Tanzania. Of course, that's a story on exclusively on page 6 and 7 of the Standard newspaper, and of course, matters to do with the rising intolerance and worrying trend across East Africa. And of course, this is, of course, actually kind of a trend where you see the young people actually are the uprising against the government, and reports of protests in Tanzania as the East African nation took to the polls yesterday highlighted a growing feeling of disenchantment by the region's citizens who are concerned about the rise in autocracy. Now, in unverified clips on social media platforms like X, Tanzanians across different towns are seen staging demonstrations against President Samia Suluhu, who has blocked competition from major opposition parties, with her administration jailing her most formidable rival, Tundu Lissu, of the Chama cha Demokrasia and cha Maendeleo, that is Chadema. Mobilization for protests symbolic they were staged to question the legitimacy of the presidential vote has gone for weeks, incorporating Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda activists in a joint clamp back against the shrinking democratic space in the region. All right, and of course, we shall be, keeping tabs with what's actually happening in Tanzania. Of course, we shall be bringing you in a subsequent bulletins later on in the day here on EBN television. All right, now back to the country. Other stories making headlines on page 2 of the Standard newspaper is that is MPs told of looming exam crisis as NEC battles funding shortfall. Now, the administration of this year's national examinations is facing financial challenges that may affect the marking process and the release of the results it has emerged. Now, MPs had on Wednesday that the collection of examination papers from secure containers and the payment of dozens of contracted personnel could be disrupted if the full allocation for the exercise is not released immediately. A total of 342,687 contracted professionals have been engaged in administration of assessments and examinations. They include center managers, supervisors, invigilators, security officers, and staff from the Ministries of Education and Interior and National Administration. Of course, the marking of the Kenya Junior Secondary School Education Assessment and the Kenya Certificate of Secondary School Education, that is KCSE, and the examinations of Kenya National Council, that is NEC, expects to deploy over 40,000 examiners for structured papers. Of course, that's a story on page 2 of the Standard newspaper. Now let's take a look at a story that has been making headlines across the country this particular month of October. Now, outrage mounts over state silence on missing activists, that is Bob Njagi and Nicholas Oyo. And you'll remember, according to reports, that they too were actually, it is alleged that they were abducted in Uganda. And of course, it has been a month since the Kenyan activist, that is Nicholas Oyo and Bob Njagi, abducted in Uganda, allegedly by men in uniform, as the Kenyan government remains conspicuously silent. Now, the two, both members of the Free Kenya movement, were alleged seized at Starbucks petrol station in Kampala on October 1st of 2025. Now, since then, their whereabouts remains unknown, and repeated calls for action from Kenya authorities have gone unanswered. Now, each night, their families go to bed not knowing whether their sons are alive or dead, whether they will return home. The silence from both Kampala and Nairobi has only deepened their pain. Now, Uganda authorities have maintained their stance, insisting that they know nothing about the activist disappearance and deny that the two are in their custody. Now, the families say they have been left to chase shadows, while officials who should be demanding answers have turned a blind eye. Now, under both the domestic and international law, the government of Kenya bears the primary responsibility to protect its citizens, whether at home or abroad. Right, and of course, as far as this particular matter is concerned, we have not heard, from the government, including the Prime Cabinet Secretary and for Foreign Affairs, that is Musalia Mudavadi. They have not issued a statement in regards to this particular story. And of course, the Ugandan authorities say they have, they know more about this activist, Kenyan activist, that is Nicholas Oyo and Bob Njagi. Now, the Standard newspaper actually has given the chronology of events since the abductions, or rather the disappearance of these two activists in Kampala, that is in Uganda. And of course, on October 1st, 2025, it is alleged that activist Bob Njagi and Nicholas Oyo were abducted by men in uniform at Stabek petrol station in Kampala. Now, on October 3rd to 10th of this year, families raised alarm as contact is lost. Kenyan authorities still stay silent. Now, on October 12th of 2025, Ugandan police deny holding the two. All right. Now, on October 15th, Amnesty International Kenya and Vocal Africa demanded action from both the governments. On October 18th, Ugandan's High Court dismisses habeas corpus plea, saying police and military are not holding them. All right. Now, on October 22nd of 2025, LSK, that is the Law Society of Kenya, calls ruling what they termed as absurd plans to escalate to regional and international courts. And on October 25th, activists protest in Nairobi demand proof of life, denied access to Mudavadi's office. Of course, from October 26th to 27th, Amnesty launched a global campaign urging pressure on President Museveni. Of course, on October 30th, 1 month of on the families are still in anguish. Both governments still stay silent. Of course, the families need closure, and of course, we expect more from the government, of course, in regards to this particular matter. They should, protect its citizens. And of course, we hope that, the two activists will be actually be found alive and safe. Right, still on matters, corridors of justice, the EACC raised Nyamira's governor's homes over 382 million Kenya shillings graft probe in anti-corruption agencies yesterday raided the homes and offices of Nyamira governor, that is Amos Nyaribo, and 4 senior county officials in connection with the 382 million tender probe. Now at dawn, Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission detectives stormed Nyaribo's Karen Hills residence in Nairobi as part of their simultaneous operations across Nyamira and Kisii counties. What began as a routine search quickly turned dramatic in Karen when the family members confronted journalists who were filming the operation. Of course, reporters from the Standard, this particular newspaper, who were at the compound to cover the raid, captured footage of items being carted away by investigators, among them a safe box and documents. However, shortly after the items were loaded into the EACC vehicle, a man and a woman approached the journalist and demanded that they delete the video footage and still photographs, claiming that the filming, what they termed, infringed on their privacy and was being conducted on private property without consent. All right. Now, taking photos and recording videos of the reporters, they threatened to sue the journalists if the footage was aired. Now, despite the protest, the journalist declined to comply, maintaining that the raid was a matter of public interest, given that it involved public official and a corruption probe authorized by the courts. The EACC officers, however, and accompanying police officers did not intervene. And according to the EACC, the searches were part of ongoing investigations into the irregular awarding of a tender to Spentech Engineering Limited, which allegedly received payments exceeding the value of work done. The EACC, however, noted that the operation also targeted the offices and residents of the Housing Chief Officer Lamek Mushuki Nyariki, Roads Executive Peris Mose, Finance CEC Asbeth Maombe, and Public Works Chief Officer Josephat Oruru, who have been identified as persons of interest in the alleged graft scheme. That's a story on page 3 of the Standard newspaper. Also, matters education on the Standard newspaper. CS Ogamba, that is the education CS, that is Julius Migos Ogamba, says he will ensure that all candidates sit exams despite floods, of course, which the rains are on. He says that the exams will continue as planned without hindrances. That's a story on page 2 of the Standard newspaper. Of course, what I need to expect this particular day, drug running suspects appear in court, and in Bungoma County, community in efforts to save forest, and of course in Nakuru County, ex-official has a case to answer where a former Nyandarua accountant in the Department for Industrialization, that is Regina Werimu, has been put on a defense in an economic crime case, right? That's what's making headlines in the corridors of justice here on the Standard newspaper this particular morning. Of course, I shall continue keeping tabs with this developing stories, and we shall be bringing you, of course, in a subsequent bulletins. But because I'm a sports person, let's take a look on what's making headlines in the world of sports. And WAFCON, here we come, the Harambee Starlets back on the African stage. And of course, this actually tremendous stellar performance by the Harambee Starlets. And of course, after 9 years of waiting, the gods of football finally smiled and said yes to the Harambee Starlets, ending their long wait to play continental football. Now, the Kenyans beat Gambia's Queen Scorpions 4-1 on aggregate to qualify for the 2026 Women's African Cup of Nations, that is WAFCON, set for Morocco on March 17th to April 3. Now, this will be Kenya's second appearance on the African stage, having made their debut in 2016. After announcing their arrival on the big stage, Starlets failed to qualify for subsequent championships, hence staying in the cold for close to a decade. Right now, determined to make their WAFCON return, Starlets beat Gambia 3-1 at home before sealing their ticket with a 1-0 win away in Senegal. Now, the second leg of the final round of qualifiers was played at the Stade Lat Dior in this Senegal. For Gambia, that does not have approved the stadium to host international matches. All right, that's what's up on the world of sports, and of course, congratulations to the Harambee Starlets for their stellar performance since the onset of this particular match. So, of course, wish them luck, even as set back to the African stage to represent the country. Of course, it is exactly 15 minutes past the top of the hour. You're now up to speed with us making headlines from across 47 counties. And of course, in the world of sports this particular morning, of course, what we're waking up to this particular morning as far as news is concerned. Of course, we shall continue keeping tabs with these developing stories, and we shall be bringing you in a subsequent bulletins later on in the day at 1 p.m., 7 p.m., 4 p.m., and 9 p.m. My name is Martin Masharia. At that note, to wrap up this particular program, you've been watching Morning Live. My name is Martin Masharia once again. Do yourself lovely day. And as always, let's meet you during the day, even as we continue keeping you up to speed. That's making headlines from across 47 counties and, of course, across our borders. My name is Martin Masharia once again. Do yourself a lovely day. And as always, let's do this again when God says we do.